Hi, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Corner, episode 101. Whoop, whoop.
Yes. Woo, woo, woo.
Whoop, whoop.
Three digits. Three
Three
digits.
digits,
What up?
baby.
What
Here
up?
we
What up?
go.
What up? Yeah, here we go. So, what are we talking about today, Jen?
Well, Casper, we're going to talk about the epitome of marketing that people tend not to get right. Strategy, building blocks
Yes,
and fundamentals to strategy. And I hear you recently discussed this with a bunch of ladies.
I did. I did a talk for some ladies, women in marketing, super cool group. I love all these cool
I'm a
initiatives,
member.
by the way. Yeah.
Shout out to all the organizers, Diana and Camilla and
Yeah,
everyone
but you
else on
kind
the
of
team.
ghosted me. You didn't show up, right? So I don't know, like.
I'm real sorry. I trust and believe I was not in a better place. I was in Stockholm.
Yeah, all
Just
good,
kidding.
all good.
Stockholm's lovely, but I was running a workshop for a portfolio company and was very gutted I couldn't go and
Yeah.
learn
It
from
is what
you.
it is. It's fine. You missed out the best session. It's fine. You can take it.
Heckle you. I was gonna heckle you through some rotten eggs.
Boo. Boo. But I think like so I had that session, right? Like I had that presentation, and then as per usual, which is why we do these kind of presentation, I think you feel the same, is like forcing yourself to do these presentations makes us kind of think about like what it is we actually do, like why are we doing the things we do, right?
Mhm.
And I think I've mentored a bunch of people, and you're part of the mentor programs as well and
I
such.
am.
And one of the questions I've always gotten the most is like, Casper's great. I want to do more strategy, but I don't know how to get started. Like how do I structure it? And I actually found it's not the actual coming up with the strategy that's hard. It's the structure around presenting it and like materializing it, if you can say so.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to chat about today was how do you do that? Like,
Mhm.
and I think we both have. There's a million, literally millions of different ways to do this. So
Mhm.
I have one approach I'm going to share today, but I know you also have another approach. It's kind of similar. We're getting the same place. It's just
Mhm.
different approaches again.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Just for everyone setting the scene. And I think it's a important, and now I use it a lot in marketing sense, but I think you can use it in multiple, like it's not related only to marketing. And it's not related to only being ahead of marketing. It can also be content marketing strategy, paid ad strategy, whatever. It's like it's a framework, at
Mhm.
least from my perspective, that you can use in other scenarios too.
Yes.
So, all right.
Cool.
With that said, let's dive in. So essentially, I think I have a lot of points, and I'll make those notes along the way. But I think the foundation of all strategies should be based around when you set it up structurally should essentially entail four things. There should be some sort of analysis. So technically you could have a step before that called, let's call it setting the scene, like setting the scene a little bit, but technically you have an analysis. So the point of an analysis is essentially, and here you can, like, don't get me wrong, you can look at whatever the fuck you want to look at, right? Like you can analyze everything. Like there's no limitation. I think if you're doing like a overall marketing strategy, then stuff like customer research, looking at ICP, decision-making units, positioning, messaging, resources, focus, metrics, pricing, all things relevant. But it could also be stuff like channels, like how are you performing in your channels? And it can be
Mhm.
so different things. The point is not that we limit the analysis. Of course, you have to have some sort of direction. If you're doing a marketing strategy, well, analyze things that are important to marketing, like and a lot of things are, but maybe not everything. So I think the first part is that, like doing some sort of analysis, right? And here you can go quite deep, but that's not the point. The goal of the analysis is getting to some sort of, in my opinion, is getting to a point where you can say, now you mapped what I call the digital landscape. It doesn't have to be digital, but like the landscape of the situation you're in. And
Mhm.
they could split it into multiple different pillars and be like, hey, so when it comes to demand generation, this is what's happening. When it comes to demand capture, this is what's happening. When it comes to content marketing, or when it comes to operations, or whatever it comes to sales process, what are the important things you found to summarizing it? That's important.
Mhm. And is this, are you talking about like what tools and channels you want to use or just what is available at your disposal for your
Here
industry?
it's a great question. So for here,
Yeah.
like what my approach is, like here, I'm just literally just like, if I'm looking at then typically when I do these kind of things, I'm looking at marketing, right? So if I'm
Mhm.
looking here, so I'm looking literally, I'm just analyzing their marketing. So their whole engine. Like, so I'm looking at their CRM, I'm looking at their performance of like, are they converting stuff? I'm looking at how they're doing in their LinkedIn ads. I'm looking in their Google ads. I'm looking at their positioning. I'm looking at their ICP setup, all that stuff. So I'm essentially evaluating everything. You can't do like, don't drown yourself. You can also overanalyze. So pick out the ones that have a gut feeling are important. But this is like actually to a large extent, the meat of the bone is in this phase. Like a lot of people have a tendency to underanalyze, and I think that's a shame.
Yeah.
And then the second pillar is what I call opportunities, because the analysis brings forth a bunch of opportunities. Now, there's a very big, because the third one is called solutions. We'll get to that in a second. And there's a very big distinction between opportunities and solutions. So opportunities, as it comes from the name, you can kind of tell, is about figuring out like, what are the things we could do? Like, what are the opportunities out there? What are the potential things we're doing? We're not outlining how to do it yet. We're just outlining these are the potential things we should be doing. Because at the end of the day, your analysis starts at the very top. Like, if actually look at it a bit like a funnel, right? Like,
we love a funnel. We marketers, don't we?
Love a good upside down triangle, right? So and for me, like, the analysis starts at the very top. You can look at everything, and then the opportunities are derived from the analysis. So like, the positioning really sucks. Opportunity, let's fucking fix the positioning. That might give us XYZ, right? So that opportunity is to change the positioning, right? And here I think it's important that you select not too many. It's a classic thing of like, don't overdo it. Simplify things. What is like, identify some, and maybe sometimes, typically especially when you do a marketing strategy, you have to tie into another strategy. So maybe there's like, you've done an analysis, but you have let's say you have a strategic objective from the company that you need to do a go-to-market plan, or you need to win X amount of clients, or whatever it is, some sort of bigger narrative for the whole company. And then you can say, okay, based on the analysis, then these are the opportunities that will tie into this bigger strategic objective. These are the potential. And my suggestion is typically don't pick too many, pick 3.
Okay.
Like, if you're doing more than 3, like, ask yourself, is that really the right thing? And if you're doing more, like, doesn't mean like mass can probably do 4, but my point is simplify it. And I think that's a greater goal in general. When I advocate for doing proper strategy decks, keep it fucking simple, folks. Like, the point is to simplify it so much. You need to, and we'll get to that later, but you need to simplify way more than you think. So anyways, so you get to that, and then I think it's important also when you do these kind of strategies to visualize it properly. A lot of people, they're like, don't get me wrong, you can get a strategy across in 3 bullets sometimes, but most of it, like, a lot of it is carried under visualization. And especially if you work in marketing, please, for the love of God, make your like visualization of your strategy, make it look good. Like, spend some time on actually like presenting those opportunities, put them in some fancy boxes. They don't have to move too much, but make it look good, right? Like, that presentation matters. And then these outline the opportunities, what you can actually do. It's important for me that opportunities is very much about like storytelling, right? Like, opportunities about saying like, we are at this place, we have the opportunity to get to this place. We're not explaining how we get there. We're just saying the opportunity is to get from A to B.
Yep.
Right. And that's I always found important.
I've been using a new model that it has these boxes, but actually in a different order, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's time for me to jump in or
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So one of the models I've been working with lately is the 5-step strategy model, which is from the book Playing to Win by Roger Martin. So it starts with, what is our winning aspiration? So that's kind of, I guess, the opportunity maybe, or like, what does good look like? What do we want to be? Do we want to generate more pipeline? Are we the market leader? What are we trying to achieve? And then the next step is like, where will we play? So what's our ICP? What's our segment? So kind of, it's the same, like you said in the beginning, it's the same.
And I asked the same question, like, where are we playing? What's the playing field? Like, it's the same question. Yeah, so exactly.
And then it's, how do we win? So what are the key tactics and campaigns and messaging and breaking it down that way. So it's the same, like you said, it's the same elements, it's just put in a different order. I'm a big reverse engineering fan of like, this is where we want to be, what needs to be true to get there. So that's one of the reasons this model works for my brain, but it's the same elements.
It's very much the same. Like, it's the same principles. And we've actually used that model in SparkForce as well, but then we went away from it a little bit because we felt like it didn't. There was some issues around like how do I explain it? It didn't. It became a little bit too American fluffy.
How dare you? American Fluffy was my nickname in high school.
Sorry. So we've actually we have some core parts like where do we play, where do we win, like how do we win, that part we still use, but some of the other elements we don't. But anyways, it's not to take any away from it. And then at least what I do normally, then I go to solutions, and that's the first one I split up into different things. But it's just solutions are, as people can probably tell, it's about telling like how do you solve the opportunities you've chosen, right? And here it's about splitting. I split it into three things. Like, what are the actions? So what are the things you're going to do? So it could be the implement best practices across a platform. Okay, what does that mean? Then doing a conversion setup, changing a campaign setup, XYZ. There's a bunch of things you need to do. Cool. What's the impact of those things? So, okay, doing those things will improve our impression share. It will give us more relevant visitors. It will give some more pipeline, whatever it is. That's the impact. And then the last one, KPIs or success metrics, or also another way to look at it, what does good look like, right? Yeah. Like, what are the things we're looking at? And then you highlight as much data as you can. So you put it as precise as possible, like, but you look at actual hardcore KPIs, right? And I think that I found that's very useful, right? Because that also simplifies it, puts gets a lot of, not ownership yet, but at least it gets like some credibility, like, because now you're actually attaching some real action points to what you want to do.
And that's the trickle down, right? That's what everyone wants. Like, here's a situation, here's what we can do, here's how we're going to do it. Almost like starting with your why.
Yeah.
Then your how, then the what, right? Why are we doing this? How are we going to do it? What do we need to do to make it happen? So I'm a big fan of that. It's kind of, you have these, the problem with a strategy sometimes is like, it just seems so lofty. Like, it's so like, we're going to win the mid-market. And it's like, well, fuck. How are we going to do that? And then, breaks it down into actually, what can I do today to help me achieve that in a few months or whatever that is, a few years. So great.
Exactly. And I think there's also like, most of the strategies I do are not for 5 years in a row, right? Like there's so there's most of the strategies I do are a year forward, right? Like sometimes in SparkForce, we actually developed a strategy of like, we had some things that go vision mission, those things go beyond the year, and then we had some more things that are more like within the year, right? So that's also a good distinction. And then the last one I call conclusions. You can call it wherever, but it's like finalization, and it's more about actually outlining. So where do we go from here? Like, it's more about like the next steps, and so to speak. Here, you typically include stuff like timelines, owners, stuff like that, right? And here, so I remember before, and we used this model ourselves in SparkForce when we kind of do strategy for clients and stuff. And I remember initially I didn't always have timelines properly ingested. I'm shit at doing timelines. I'm really bad at it. So and then we had one client we won at some point, and one of the owners of the project, he was like, "This is all great. I love you guys, but God, I need a timeline, man. I can't what does this mean?" And I think it was just such a eye-opening thing, because I've actually, and when I've been in-house, I never did timelines, to be completely fair. Like I said, like, sometimes I did like, this will happen in Q1, right? And it's Q1. Q1, Q2. Okay, sure. Yeah. But now I really build a timeline, and after having done that, like, I can't live without it. Like, I think it's such a good way to make things like digestible. And that brings me to one of my last points, and then I've talked enough. Is that you also attach the timeline, and you attach all the initiatives you highlighted with owners. You put names on it.
Accountability.
Who owns that shit, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So
otherwise, it'll never happen. It will.
Otherwise, it never happens, right?
Yep.
So you literally, because like a lot of strategy for me is always, it ends before that step. So you highlight all the things you want to do, but you don't highlight how you're going to do it, and you don't highlight who's going to do it. And that's where, for me, like, and then sometimes, but Casper, then you're making the plan, and it's maybe becoming more like, fuck off. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I just like, we got to do something tangible.
It's
Like
accountability.
it's accountability. I get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're doing strategy for like a 5,000 man company. You can't be like, and Jennifer, she's gonna own Google Ads optimization, and now over to Casper. Like, I get
Yeah.
it, it's a different stake. But in the companies we typically work with, you gotta have some owners, especially if you're in marketing. You're maybe 20 people. Then it's not that hard to put owners, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
Agreed.
then I also typically I add one thing. I also ask some like some risk assessment. Like how can this fuck up? Like what are the things we need
Mm,
to worry about? Like lack of resources, creative freedom, management buy-in, whatever it is, right?
mm,
Like what's the issue? What does it mean? How can we solve it potentially before it happens?
mhm.
And because I think the goal with this, and I think that's super important, like is asking yourself the question, why are you not getting the things you want to get out of your marketing?
Yeah. Well, that's
Why
if
you and I are pretty
you
strong, right?
yeah,
We are really strong marketeers. We no hard feelings, right? We're pretty good. Humble
none
brag.
taken.
Yeah, not like right. And so, but even us, we also meet barriers along the way.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I think a lot of the reason both you and I have been as successful as we have is because we're good at making a plan, articulating it, and then visualizing it to people. So and
Mhm.
up like managing up, as we say, right? So you
Yep.
convince your upper stakeholders because once you have a plan, then it's hard to deviate from the plan. Because then you
Mhm.
can't just have like this guy coming in from say, hey, from sales, hey, I want to do this thing for 3 months. I'm like, that's cool, but look here, buddy. Like we have this plan. This is what you want to do. If you want to do this and you really believe that it's more important than this plan, you need to tell me why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's
and that's
super
one of the
powerful.
important things of having a strategy, right? And this comes up time and time again, but if you don't have a strategy, then you're a service department and
Yes.
you're just taking in requests. And when you have a strategy, it gives you those kind of guardrails. So you can say to, it's usually sales, let's be honest, who come in with requests, and that's fine. They need help. But if you're spending your entire day doing sales decks or one pagers, you're not actually moving the needle forward for marketing. And I remember having this conversation, one of the companies I work with, I remember my boss, who was a CRO, so very sales background, not a marketing background at all. And he said, you're like Wonder Woman with a shield. Like you just keep batting away all of our requests. And I said, yes, because if I don't, my team is going to spend all day enabling sales and we're not going to actually have an impact. And then you're going to fire me because, I'm not having an impact. So I can't say yes to everything. And so
Yeah.
strategy is going to give you the ability to say no. Until you have a strategy, you can't say no because you can't tell anyone why.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can't say why I'm saying no because I don't know where the hell I'm going. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So sure, I
No.
might as well,
And then
Yeah.
you end up being that, like you said, like you end up being like an order taker, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just taking orders. You're
Service department.
waiting for people to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And
And
that's the
that's not what
opposite of
marketing
what
should
you
be
want
doing.
to. That's how you get fired, people. No hard feelings, but that's how
100%.
you get fired.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
you're not having the impact. So it's actually better to say no and piss people off than say yes and not actually deliver value because
yeah.
that's when you're going to be in danger. And the other thing I wanted to say when you mentioned getting buy-in, right? Getting buy-in is
Mm.
super important for strategy. And the only way you will get buy-in is if this strategy connects to company goals. And that's
Yes.
the really
Yes.
big important part because if you don't connect it to company goals, then they have no reason to say yes. So you need to start, your trickle down should start with like, here's what the company wants to achieve. Here's how we're going to achieve it. And here's our strategy or here's how we're going to contribute. And then here's how we're going to contribute. It needs to tie in so that that's been my secret to success is taking management strategy for the business and translating it into how I can help. And in order to help, this is what I need to do. And in order to make this happen, this is what I need from you, management.
Exactly.
Yep.
And typically for a lot of the people who are listening and you're tapping into another strategy someone else has formed, right?
Yeah.
Like and that's okay. That's part of being part of a business typically. Unless you're the CEO and you own your own company, like then you are most likely tapping into someone else's strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the important things is also like for also getting a promotion, the easiest way to get a promotion in this world is to be the one with a plan. Like it's actually sometimes super simple. Like if you show up in a room, there's 10 people and one of those people has a plan, like has a strategy deck, then it's up to the rest of the 9 to convince everyone else without a strategy or a plan or a visualization of it why
Mm-hmm.
why they're not going to go with that plan, right? And that's way harder than to be the one who has a plan.
Yep.
So yeah.
And when it comes to, okay, so we've got our strategy, but here's the thing that I'm seeing is that before you can actually do your strategy, there's certain things you need in place. So I don't know if these count as some of the strategy or like baseline, but before you begin your strategy, you need to know who your ICP is. You need to know your
Yes.
value prop. You need data. You need reliable data, because that's the other thing is like if you say, oh, we're going to put X amount of our budget in Google Ads. Why? Is the data showing you that that's driving revenue if that's what you're trying to achieve? If you don't have any data, it's really hard for you to say why you're going to put this much effort in Google Ads or in LinkedIn or wherever, or events. And so there's kind of a baseline that we like to work with of like, if these things are in place, then we can start talking strategy. So, and those things vary a little bit, but it tends to be ICP and segmentation, your value proposition, and good data. And then from
Yes.
that, you can start crafting a strategy that will help you achieve your goals.
100%. I totally agree. And I think I mentioned that in the beginning too, right? So I totally agree. I think it's important sometimes to not, one thing I do however, feel is that sometimes the prerequisites for getting started with strategy can feel insurmountable. Like it can feel too much. Like just the ones you mentioned right now, doing a ICP, figuring out positioning, like knowing resources, knowing metrics, having your data foundation. I don't know about you, but that can sometimes be a lot of work, right? Like and sometimes, like, I don't get me wrong, we want to, if you end up spending 6 months on getting that, or 3 months, or whatever it takes, that's probably too long, right? So I'm always like, it's never too long to get your ICP right, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Is that's
Yeah.
like, I feel like sometimes people get caught up in like, we can't move forward until this is completely in place. And I feel like here you just have to say, like, we need to look at these things, and we need to have a good idea of, like, we need to have a agreement on our ICP. But one thing I also recommend, because like a lot of companies, and I talk to a lot of companies, right? And I just baffles me every single time. 9 out of 10 companies can't explain to me in a one-on-one conversation who their ICP is. They can say, like, it's these customers, but it's never precise.
And if they can't do that, how the hell is marketing supposed to get more of them?
It's fucking impossible. It's insane.
And
Like,
that's
it's
my point in that. And I can see what you say, because sometimes it's so overwhelming. There's so much you have to do. But what I get really worried about, and I've seen this happen a lot, is you base your strategy on assumptions, and those assumptions are wrong, and you have spent a whole quarter maybe going in the wrong direction. Case in point, if you do webinars, we looked at data and we're like, webinars, that's driving really good leads. So let's do webinars. Let's spend money, spend resources. And then a year down the line, we realized not a single one of those webinar participants actually became a paying customer. Shit. We have spent so much time down this road. And yeah, and we were in the same position. We didn't have the data because of a long cycle. So we based our assumptions on the data that we had, which ended up not being accurate. So, I understand what you're saying, and you don't want to just be completely like stagnant and just stuck. You need to do something, but sometimes I get worried if you base it on assumptions without really looking at what has worked and what you should be doing, you could go down the wrong path and it'll be too late. But
definitely. But I think you lose more cases by inaction than you lose by picking the wrong thing.
Yeah,
Like,
management, yes. To management, they don't want you to go, well, we can't do anything. But maybe what you need to say is, we're going to focus on our ICP and narrowing that first. We're going to take the data that we have, and we're going to run with that. And maybe that's where you have your assumptions and dependencies listed.
Yeah, because there will be some assumptions. You can never get. There's never a point where you can't, where you're beyond that. I don't think that exists. And of course, there's different cases. Like if you're a 10,000 man company, figuring out ICP can be way harder than if you're a 50-man company, right? There's a little bit more assumptions in a 50-man company, but that's the point. I think one of my things I always try to say when it comes to stuff is, if you get to the point, because you can kind of present the part where you say, like, the part one of the plans, like, hey, we need to figure out the ICP, guys. Like, yes, and then everyone agrees we need to ICP. In order to, once we've done the ICP, then we can, this is the opportunity of getting the ICP right, and here's the solution, blah, 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 right? So you can actually include that in as part of your strategy to figure out the ICP. That I kind of want to say that. But what I wanted to say is also that once you put in ownership, so be like, so you say like, hey, Jen, I'm gonna be the one. I'm gonna spearhead the ICP project. Like, and then, like, if you say that, like, the rest of the men are like, yeah, good, Awesome.
And it's
cool.
going to be done by this date, you know, or we're going to aim
then
to have
yes,
it.
exactly. Because that's my next
Then
point.
once we have that, yeah,
exactly.
and that's your
'Cause then
timeline.
so the first thing you do is you get ownership, you take ownership. And once they agree
Mm.
to that, then you set them a deadline they can't deny. Because then you say, like, hey guys, in 2 weeks, on Friday next week, or in 2 weeks, I'm gonna pick the ICP. So all your input, all your feedback has to be delivered to me before Friday on this whatever date. If that doesn't happen, then I will exclusively pick this. You gave me ownership, I'm taking ownership, I'm doing this. Because that's the way to make sure it doesn't take 3 months, 6 months, whatever.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing. I think management care more about seeing something done. It's more me wanting to make sure I have an impact. And I know I've been in cases where we wanted a 2-week window to figure out what an enterprise is before we launch an ABM. And management were like, no, launch it now. And we're like, but we don't have an agreed definition of what an enterprise is. Launch to who? So you kind of have to make your case sometimes. But yes, I think also putting a deadline. Like if you say we're not launching until we know what the ICP is, that doesn't tell us anything. It's we're currently investigating the ICP. We've set up a task force that's looking at it right now, and we will have an ICP definition ready for approval by next week, or and then build off of that, because you cannot sit still. Definitely as a marketer who has to justify why you exist all the freaking time, you cannot sit still. You cannot wait. Yeah, you have to be moving. But just that marketing upwards, that marketing your marketing team, make sure you tell people this is what we're doing first. This is what we need to do so that we can do this right. So this is what we're doing, and make sure everyone's clear, because that's the other dark side of marketing. Is we're the only team that's under so much bloody scrutiny and accused of not doing anything, and we're the first ones to get laid off if times get tough. So you kind of always have to be contributing in one way or another.
That's exactly the point, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess to wrap it up, or is there more? I was just
no.
gonna,
I think that's kind of like the important parts, right? Like it's a whole talk for another day. Like it talked for like 1.5 hours. But I think if you get the fundamentals right, and like as I said, there's different approaches. Mine is analysis, opportunities, solutions, aka actions, impacts, and KPIs, and then conclusions, next steps, timelines. If you get that kind of frame right, whatever it looks like, that's your structure. That's what you can work from, and that's important to know. And it's the first one. It's like everything else in life. The first one is super hard.
Yeah, and then you get a flow.
And then you get a flow.
Yeah.
But also, I want to point, like, the important part about all this is that you get to a place where at the end of the day, it's about convincing other, like, not there's a lot of other things to it, but it's about convincing other people that like getting them on board. Like, I think a lot of people forget why we present that plan to either management or the rest of the team. Is like, I want to go here. But you can't do it alone. Like, it's very rarely. You need these people on board, and they need to be inspired. So don't be afraid to make your plan aspirational as well. I think that's also important. So
I think it's okay to start aspirational at the top, as long as it's actionable at the bottom.
Yes.
And you can show the clear path. And that's why I'm a big advocate of reverse engineering. This is where we want to be, and this is how it links to what the company wants. So this is how we're going to help the company achieve. And then you can get it down to, who is doing what by when.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Cool. So go out there and start strategizing, friends.
Do it. Make a plan.
Now, are you gonna maybe include something in the show notes for our listeners?
Yeah, I'll include some things.
Give them something.
Yeah, I'll give them
I
something.
can throw in a slide too.
I'll throw in a slide or two. But I think, like, if you're listening to this, we're at least recording this in February 2025. It's probably a little bit too late, but it's never too late to get started. So get started now. If you don't have a strategy for 2025, get your ass out. Like,
get it done. And by when? By when? Commit. By when?
So you have, like, actually, like, it's kind of good. It's a good principle. Like, most strategies we do in Start Spark Force takes us 1 week to do.
Yeah.
Full on pressure. We've done some homework before. It's a little bit cheating. So let's say 2 weeks. But 2 weeks, you don't need 3 months. 2 weeks, set a hard deadline for yourself. That it doesn't have to take longer.
Nice. All right. Get strategized. Get strategizing, people. English.
And thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.